today we're looking at the story of more, chapter 15, warming air. Whew, things are starting to get scary. The author starts off with just talking about wind, talking about the different kinds of wind, the hot wind in the desert, the cold wind in the Arctic deserts, the wet wind on the ocean and the beaches, just all sorts of different kinds of winds, and talking about air, really, and how the air is just, wind is just moving air. And the air has gotten warmer, the Earth's temperature has gotten warmer by 1.5 degrees higher, and that's Fahrenheit. But just at 1.5 degrees, there's been a lot of changes in the environment. And the author talks about some differences from when she was a kid to now, and how that change, 1.5 degrees, has happened in 30, 40 years or something like that. She talks about when she was a kid, there was like tons of snow. Now there's not as much snow. Still plenty of snow in like Minnesota, I think, but the snow season starts 2 weeks later than it used to. The ice on the lakes melt 3 weeks sooner, things like this. And so the winter season is kind of shortening. And that's all like from since she was a kid. Just looking at those different examples, and she gives some other examples too. Actually, that's one of my discussion questions, so I won't go into it now. But I remember a lot of differences in weather even since I was a kid. And she starts talking about and starts explaining a little bit of what the change in weather actually does, because it doesn't necessarily just make it all rise up in the winter and in the summer, but rather it creates these energy pockets. And so the air gets hotter and there's more CO2 in this. And then this pocket bumps into a normal pocket of air. And then this pocket of air starts to behave differently than it used to. And so these energy pockets, what it's creating is more energy in the weather. So maybe not necessarily having higher temperatures, but more drastic temperatures. So there would be more droughts or more storms, right? Depending on where you lived. And with all this going on, she talks about the UNFCCC, the United Nations. I can't remember what they called it, but something about climate change. And a lot of countries in the world got together and talked about climate change, what they should do about climate change, and how their countries can help stop climate change. And certainly they talked about the dangers. And there were, I think, 4 different scenarios that could happen if the temperature raised too high. And there were 2 really famous agreements that kind of came out. And these weren't legally binding or anything. They were just kind of promises. The first one was the Kyoto Agreement, which a bunch of countries signed and said, we will lower our emissions back to 1990 levels. Nothing happened. So then there was the Paris Agreement, which a bunch of countries signed and said, we will do better and use less fossil fuels and make less CO2, which hasn't really happened much. And so these 2 agreements, even though they're really good natured and intended to be good things, not much has come from them. Although you could argue that a lot of good has come from it, but maybe because of population increase, those good things aren't quite as easily seen, which the author would also suggest. One of the problems with with these countries trying to lower their emissions levels of CO2 is trying to help individuals like you and me use their energy better. But a lot of news and things like that try to use fear to get us to stop using more energy or to stop using our cars and things like that. Oh my goodness, the world's gonna end! Ah! Oh man, that just freaks us out. Rather than inspiring or encouraging us to use technology differently, to use energy differently. And so the author shares like using fear isn't the answer. Okay, making people afraid isn't going to help anyone. And she talks about when she was a kid in the 80s and how she was afraid of nuclear war. And being afraid didn't help anything. It didn't even make nuclear weapons less. In fact, they went up. And so using fear to try and inform people about the greenhouse effect or global warming, she doesn't think is a useful tactic. And what she says is instead, people need information, because information draws curiosity and it draws a conversation. But fear makes people want to ignore and stop believing. So giving information. She talks about what scientists were looked at in the 70s as this 2 degrees Celsius change in temperature. And scientists in the 70s said, if there were 2 degrees temperature change, we think this would happen in the world. And it's just catastrophic weather events. More storms, more typhoons, more hurricanes, more droughts, more dry seasons. There's even potentially the water in the ocean changing to become more acidic. So it becomes like an acid water rather than just salt water, which is still kind of an acid water. And so a lot of news and agreements like the Kyoto Agreement and Paris Agreement are all about stopping the weather from getting 2 degrees Celsius higher than I think in the 1970s or from the industrial era 200 years ago. And so the author says, okay, here's the information, here's what's going on. It's time to get serious. It's time for us to really look at how we use technology, how we can innovate to create new ways to use energy, and to get serious about our economy, or not economy, our environment. And so she talks a little bit about this and ends with this idea of, what is it exactly? Not global. Ice melting. That as the temperature increases, ice is going to melt more. And that's where she leaves us to talk about the next chapter, I think melting ice or more water. I can't remember the title. Well, let's go into some vocabulary. There were a few words here. Lamented is like to share some sadness. Oh, this is terrible. Oh, why did this happen? And maybe even sharing information in a sad way or sharing sad information. Spat is the spit, but in this case it's like to give or to throw out. And I think she's talking about spat information or something, which is to just like throw information out quickly. Contiguous, I actually had to look this one up. And contiguous means sharing a common border or being connected. So usually we say like continental United States, like the states of America that are all connected, and then Hawaii is not connected and Alaska is not connected. But I guess you can also use the word contiguous, is connected or touching borders. The next word, there's two. Well, snub is, I think her mom said that her nose is inside, it's shorter because it was so cold. Maybe she had like frostbite or something, and some tip of her nose fell off. The mom could just be joking, but the author has a pointy nose because she was able to have mittens when it was wintertime, and her mom didn't have mittens. Exacerbate means to make worse, to increase in intensity, usually with a bad meaning. Maybe if I have like some scratch on my face, okay, imagine your mom telling you this probably, and there's maybe some blood, and so there's some healing, some scab there. But as a kid, maybe it itches. Maybe I want to scratch it and take off the hard part. Well, that just makes it worse. It exacerbates, that's a tough one, the problem or the damage. Delineated means making it not in alignment. So making things off balance or off alignment. Ratified, this is like a government document making it official. So when we were talking about the Paris Agreement or the Kyoto Agreement, even though the Americans like signed the agreement, they didn't make it official. They didn't ratify it. Austerity is like a serious or severe manner, or maybe like control, limiting the energy use just with our will, our sternness. Verbatim means word for word, so reading it directly. Acidification means turning into an acid. So the ocean might turn more into an acid if CO2 levels get worse and worse. Marring means to make it damaged or not as easy to look at. I keep going like this because I think of sometimes men too are sensitive if they have like a scratch or scar on their face, because they feel like the scratch or scar mars their beauty. It detracts or diminishes or covers or destroys their beauty. Weirding, I had to look this one up because the first time she used it, I didn't quite get it, but then she used it again. And so global weirding, this is the thought of the seasons getting more and more different or weird as the temperature gets higher and higher, and they call that weirding. That leaves us with our discussion question. Have you noticed any changes in the environment since you were a kid, since you were younger? Or maybe if you're really young, think about your parents or your grandparents. Have they shared stories about how the environment, could be the weather or the cities, whatever it is around them, how they've changed? And I can think of several because I'm an old guy. But how about you? And of course, please make your own discussion question. That is all the time that we have for today. But thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Book Club Preview. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye. Hey, if you have any questions about the video today, please feel free to leave a comment in the comment section. If you had any other vocabulary words that you wanted to know what they meant, let me know. And also, if you're interested in maybe joining one of these book clubs, please leave a comment and I'll get back to you. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.